funding and manpower sources available to do woodlot management. She serves as the Southern Region Service Forestry Coordinator and as the liaison with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Through these positions, she helps coordinate programs such as EQIP and CSP to help landowners accomplish forest improvement activities in their woods. Stephanie has previously taught in the forest management program at Hocking College and worked as the forest health forester for the Division of Forestry. She's also a small woodland owner in southeastern Ohio, where she enjoys working in her own woods with her husband and son. Stephanie, you're on.
Thanks, Tom. Good morning, everyone. So I'm Stephanie Downs. I'm going to talk a little bit, as it has been alluded to several times this morning, about the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP. Basically a financial program to help you accomplish forest management in your woods, and then some options for actually getting the work done on the ground. So we're going to talk a little bit about financial resources or funding sources to help complete some non-commercial work in your woodlands. And there's several big programs that are statewide. A couple of these are run through the Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS. And those are the EQIP program, which has been talked about already a little bit, the CSP program, Conservation Stewardship Program, and then Farm Service Agency also runs the Conservation Reserve Program, which can be used for some forestry practices. Today, we're going to focus on EQIP because it takes a lot to get into some of these programs and describe them, what some of the benefits are, and the different resources that are available. I also want to throw in a little caveat here. All the photos included in this presentation were taken pre-social distancing. So just keep that in mind. If you see some photos, they were taken over a year ago. But we're going to focus today on the EQIP program. And what the EQIP program is it's an incentives program to get management in your woods completed, especially those non-commercial practices that require input, time, money, energy to improve your woods for the future. So Jeremy talked a lot about making sure your woods are healthy into the future and looking out for your future stand. Not all of that is timber harvesting. Some of that's just the improvement work that you may go in and do before you actually look at a commercial harvest. EQIP does have a specific program looking at woodlands or non-industrial private forest land. It also has programs for other land uses such as agriculture, pasture, homesteads. There's a lot of different aspects to it, but today we're going to look specifically at those things that are eligible to conduct in your forest. It is a reimbursement program. So once you sign a contract, you can then start to do some of the work that is in that contract to improve your woods. Once it's completed, you then get reimbursed a set rate usually per acre for getting that work done. So there may be some upfront costs, just something to keep in mind, but then you do get paid back once that work is complete. And it is a set rate that you get paid back depending on what you do. Those rates, as I talked about a little bit earlier, are set at a regional level. So it's decided by a multi-state committee. And it's basically based on, if we were to look at this practice on average, what is it going to cost that average landowner? And so that's how those rates are set, but that's how you would get paid at the end. And it's going to help you financially with those non-commercial woodland management activities. So a lot of the stuff we do to make our woods healthy for the future. As you can see by this list, there are a lot of practices that may be in your management plan that qualify for EQIP financial assistance. So we have this nice long list of practices. These are the official NRCS titles. We're going to take a look at some of the more common ones in a little bit more detail. But all of these practices are things that may be recommended in your management plan that may have a cost associated with them that you could apply and be eligible to get some assistance with it. Some of the more common ones are brush management, which includes our invasive plant control. Forest stand improvement includes a number of different things, tree planting. We heard about Jim Savage's prescribed burning that he did through EQIP. And so we have a lot of these available practices that you can get help with on your woodlands. And we're going to take a look at some of these common ones here. And the first one is probably the most used practice in Ohio, and that is brush management. So a lot of times if you think about brush management, you're thinking about just kind of opening up your understory. But we really use this practice in Ohio to control our woody invasive plants. So that is your brush species like bush honeysuckle, autumn olive, privet, wing burning bush. I mean, we have a whole suite of non-native invasive shrubs that we can control, but it also includes your non-native invasive trees. So any woody invasive plant we can control using the brush management practice in EQIP. So your tree of heaven, Paulownia, are both eligible also, even though they're not technically brush. This also includes some of that grapevine control that Jeremy talked about a little bit earlier. So making sure you can get your grapevines out of your high quality trees and maintain the health of those trees. The one thing to keep in mind is that through their programs, NRCS, they have a main goal of addressing what they call a resource concern, some environmental factor that they are looking at trying to improve in your woodlands. So if you have a resource concern of maybe invasive plants is your concern, they don't want you just going in to control your grapevine and leaving the complete understory of bush honeysuckle, because that doesn't actually solve a problem related to your resource. So you will have to look at the entirety of that resource, such as your grapevines and your bush honeysuckle, in order to qualify. But it's a way to help pay for some of these highly expensive activities. So I don't know how many of you have controlled invasive plants in your woods. Herbicide is not cheap, and it's the most effective way to control invasive plants in your woods generally. And so it's a way to help cover some of those costs of that herbicide and labor to get the work done. We also have an option in EQIP to look at herbaceous weeds. So the small plants in your understory may not be native, and there's two photos here. I don't know if I can actually see the chat, but I know you guys have been listening to talks for a while here. If you know either of these photos, put in the chat. Maybe Dave can check it for me, see if we get some correct answers. Dave, are you seeing anything pop in the chat?
I'm seeing garlic mustard and stiltgrass popping in the chat.
All right, good. Those are our two
Garlic
species.
mustard and Japanese stiltgrass even. So
Yeah, get specific. Yeah, this photo here on the right is garlic mustard. So obviously after it's flowered in the spring, small cluster of white flowers out at the tip. And this other photo is almost exclusively, not quite, but almost exclusively Japanese stiltgrass. So this is another common invasive plant that we see starting along trails and landings and areas where you have access. And then it rapidly spreads along those trails and creeps into your woods as well. So these are two herbaceous. Obviously, there are many more that we have in Ohio, but two of the herbaceous invasive plants that we can control using this herbaceous weed treatment. So sometimes these are a major issue on private woodlands, and this is one way that you can get help in addressing these problems. This herbaceous weed treatment practice can also be used if you are installing a new tree plantation to control some of the weeds that grow around your trees in the year after you plant. Give your trees a little bit of a head start, control some of that competition, give them more sunlight, more water, and help those trees be successful into the future. So as you'll see as we go through these, a lot of these practices have more than one option to use them under. Another one that's relatively new for Ohio is a practice called multi-story cropping, or forest farming is eventually what they're going to change this name to. But it's looking at non-timber forest products that you can grow in your woods and managing to get some of these benefits. So some of these might be trees and shrubs that you can get a food crop or medicinal out of. And the photo pictured here is actually American hazelnut. It's an edible nut that you could grow in the understory of your woods. It can include some herbaceous plants such as ginseng, but you have to make sure that you have the right growing conditions for those before you try to plant them. And then some other things, maybe mushroom cultivation. And so this is one that's relatively new. It's one we're still working out. We're still figuring out what it will adequately address. But if this is something you're interested in, this could be a really good option to help determine what management you need. Maybe you need to thin a little bit of your overstory to get more sunlight to the ground, meeting the requirements, the habitat requirements of the species that you want to grow, the actual planting of those species, and a little bit of maintenance afterwards to keep them in your woods. Another relatively new practice for Ohio is this practice called woody residue treatment. And this is one that people are starting to use, especially in Western Ohio, where they had recent tornadoes come through, or areas where you might have had a large percentage of your woods were ash. And a lot of your ash are dying out due to emerald ash borer, and you have a lot of woody material that's falling down. It's blocking management activities. Maybe it's limiting regeneration in your forest, or just limiting your access to get back in and control invasive plants or do other management activities. It's a way that you can get some money to come in because a lot of this material is not going to have commercial value, but it's limiting what you're doing in your woods. And so you need to remove it somehow or break it down so that it decomposes quicker. And it helps you deal with some of these issues that really are just devastating to your woods when it happens to you. It's not something you plan for, it's not something you expect to happen, but sometimes you just have issues where you need to clean up material off of your forest floor. There are some instances where it's been used for previous logging activities. This one has some limitations when you apply for it because your EQIP program is not designed to fix problems that you create. It's designed to improve your resource that's there. Ideally, if you conduct a timber harvest, you're going to follow Jeremy's advice, hire a professional forester, use a master logger. They're going to make sure that that woody material is taken care of at the end of the harvest and you don't have a resource problem. But sometimes you may purchase land, and when you purchase it, you realize that there's a problem that the previous landowner created. And in that case, this will help you fix that problem so that you, as a new landowner, can access your woods for management and improve the overall health and quality of your woodland. So let me get to tree and shrub site preparation and establishment. These are two separate practices that you can use to get trees planted in a new area. And you can see the photo here is an old field where they have planted trees and used tree shelters to protect those trees and get them to grow very well. But you can use a combination of these practices for a lot of objectives. So here we can use this tree shrub site preparation to actually go in and get ready to plant the trees. Generally, fall or the spring before you plan on planting, go in and control those weeds. Some areas where you have old strip mining, you can actually do some soil ripping and dumping to prepare the site. It's a really heavy, intensive management to get trees to grow in these areas. But you're basically just getting it ready. Once that site is ready, you can then use a tree and shrub establishment practice where you go and actually plant those trees and shrubs. And there's a lot of different options with some of these. So with the tree planting, you have a number of different options for how you're going to plant the trees. You can use bare root seedlings, which is most commonly used. There's different options for containerized plants, like 1-2 gallon potted trees. You can use tree shelters. So those tubes that are pictured in that to help protect against deer browse, get those trees tall enough to where the deer can't eat so much of it that the tree doesn't make it, and other options within that. And so there's a lot of different variability to meet your objectives and your goals for your property and to help establish trees, maybe in an old field area, maybe under an area where you lost all of your ash, but different options to meet your goals and objectives. We also have a, again, relatively new practice for Ohio, forest trails and landings. And this one is to help acquired issues with your trails. Again, if you're doing a timber harvest, you should be hiring a forester and a good logger and making sure that all of your best management practices are taken care of and you don't have erosion issues. But I mean, we all know that a lot of times you purchase a property and the previous owner may have harvested and tried to take what value they could before they sold it. And you may have some issues that you need to fix to help improve your trails and reduce erosion into the future. And so this is a practice available where you can install some water bars, slow down erosion off of your trails. You can do some grading, some vegetation, so seeding on these open ground areas, and fixing some problems that are already there that need repaired in order to address a resource concern. In this case, it's erosion and sedimentation of your streams. And then the last one I'm going to touch on today is forest stand improvement. And this is a practice that covers a whole lot of different activities. So as you've probably heard from Jeremy and a little bit from Jim Savage's property, there are a lot of improvement practices that you can do in your woods to increase growth on the trees that remain. All of these pretty much fall under forest stand improvement. And so with this practice, if you have a young stand, we can do a crop tree release where you go in and you pick the best trees in that area for whatever your objectives are, whether it's timber, wildlife, water quality, aesthetics. You go in and you pick your best trees. And then you cut the trees around them. As you can see this black walnut in the photo here, cut some trees around it to give it space to grow. A lot of times, if you can open it up like this photo, you can actually get 4 times the growth on that tree versus when it's directly competing with the trees around it. So helping to favor those best trees on your woods and increase their growth and make sure they make it into your future forest. Make sure they hang on through competition. We can also do a culture removal, which is more focused on taking the worst trees out of your woods to, in general, put more growth on the trees that remain or your better quality trees. We can use this practice for some thinning operations, maybe in a plantation where your trees have started to grow up. They're starting to directly compete, and go in and do a general thinning to improve the growth on the trees that are going to be your better trees in the future. Over in Eastern Ohio, we're using this recently for oak wilt management. So oak wilt is a forest pathogen. It's a fungal disease that attacks our oak trees. And the management is very intensive, very involved, requires generally cutting trees, treating the stumps with an herbicide to kill the roots, putting in a buffer, very detailed, very intense management to control a disease to protect the health of your woods that you generally is going to cost money. Normally, you're not going to have enough commercial value that you take out when you control it to pay for the entire operation. And so this is a way to help fund for disease management. We can use this practice as a mid-story management. And this was talked about a little bit when we talked about the shelter woods and oak management. A lot of times we have those oaks in our overstory. They're large, mature trees, but we don't have them in the understory. Our understory is a dense layer of maple and beech. So we can use that mid-story management to go in and deaden those maple and beech in your mid-story, let a little more light to the forest floor, and hopefully favor some of those oak seedlings over the shade tolerant species that we don't necessarily want to be our future forest. And then we can also use this forest stand improvement to put in some temporary group openings. So sometimes you may have a forest that's been high graded. It's been harvested in a non-forest manner, I guess would be a good way to put it, in the past. And you may have a pocket where all of your trees really just don't have any value anymore. They're poor species, they're poor form, they're not providing much wildlife habitat, they're not going to provide timber value in the future. And you can go in and take that group, again, a small group out to open up sunlight, create a pocket of early successional habitat for your wildlife, dense brushy area where they're going to bed, find forage, find food, and let that little pocket regenerate into desirable trees. And so yeah, most of these are not commercial. They're not ways that you can cut and sell trees, but they're ways that you're improving the trees you remain into the future and improve the overall health of your woods and growth of your trees. A lot of different ways we can use this one. So with EQIP, there are some eligibility things that come up. And so these are set by Natural Resources Conservation Service. They handle the application, they handle all the paperwork, and the Division of Forestry, through an agreement, provides the technical assistance. So if you get into this program, you're probably going to find that you're working with 2 government agencies. You're working with NRCS and ODNR, Division of Forestry. So in order to be eligible for these programs, you have to control or own non-industrial private forest land. This is geared towards private woodland owners who own, however many acres they may control. It's not an industrial type of land use, and you have control of that land. You have to fill out paperwork and comply with what they call an adjusted gross income limitation. It's a way to set a maximum income on the financial assistance. So as long as you don't make over a certain dollar amount, you then qualify for this program. that gross income is fairly high, most landowners are going to qualify, but you do have to fill out the paperwork for that. They have some highly erodible land and wetland conservation requirements that you agree to comply with. Basically just, not disturbing that highly erodible land, creating erosion issues, and preserving your wetlands, keeping them as wetlands into the future. For forestry practices, you do need a written management plan. I'm going to touch on this in a little bit. I know it's been touched on before, but a lot of you, if you're already tree farmers, have a written forest management plan. That will count as a forest management plan to apply for EQIP. We may need to add an addendum or adjust a little bit if there are that maybe weren't included originally. We all know our forests change over time, and a management plan is generally good for 10 years. If you look at a forest today, you may see a different forest than you would see 9 years into the future, especially when you look at invasive plants. So a management plan is a really good base. We may just add a little bit to it if we see issues that need addressed that we can address through this program. And then you also have to be willing to complete all of the required paperwork with NRCS and sign a contract prior to starting the work. So this program is designed to get the work done, but it does not pay for work that's already completed. So it has to be management activities that you are going to start now and complete under that contract. I do want to touch a little bit about the forest management plan. So there are landowners who do not have a current management plan, whether that's to qualify for EQIP or for a tax program or tree farm even. EQIP does have a practice called a CAP 106, Conservation Activity Plan, where you can get reimbursed to get a written forest management plan for your woods. It is, again, a reimbursement. So once you have the management plan, you then get reimbursed a set rate for that plan based on how many acres you own. That plan does have to be written by an NRCS certified TSP, or technical service provider, after the EQIP contract is signed. Now, a TSP is somebody who has a forestry background, meets educational requirements, has gone through trainings with NRCS, has 5 years of experience, and they have taken all the necessary trainings, and NRCS has recognized them as an official TSP to write these management plans. So if you're getting a management plan funded through EQIP, it can't be written by anybody. It has to be written by a certified TSP. This management plan, once you have it, will then qualify you to apply for EQIP practices in the future. And so it will then be used for applications to complete the work in your woods. This plan may also meet the requirements for other forest management programs, such as tree farm or CAUV or Ohio Forest Tax Law. I put may here with an underline because you do need to check the requirements of those programs and make sure that when your plan is written, all of those factors are included in that plan as well. So you do have to make sure it meets the requirements, but it can be used for other programs as well. And once you apply and get a contract, there are several ways to get the work done. So the CAP management plan, your forest management plan, has to be written by that TSP. And I will actually try to put this link in the chat on how to find a TSP, because NRCS's website isn't always the most helpful. Actually, I don't think it's, I'll try it here once I'm done with my talk. But I'll try to put that in. So there is a list of people who have gone through all of the trainings and are certified TSPs who are available to write your management plan. For your EQIP practices that you apply for, these can be completed either by yourself as the landowner. You can go out and do the work, and once it's done, get that reimbursement for it, or you can hire someone to do the work. So there are a lot of landowners who have time or physical constraints that limit how much they're able to do in their woods. This is a way that you can get some money to hire a vendor to do these improvement practices in your woods. Sorry, now it's not advancing. Okay, so for these vendors, most of your county NRCS, soil and water offices, and service foresters maintain a local vendor list that they can provide to you That includes any individual or company who provides timber stand improvement work for your county. So these lists are maintained on a volunteer basis where if a vendor says they want to be included on your list, they get added to the list. We are government agencies though, so we cannot recommend any one person off of this list for you, unfortunately. We can provide you with a list of people who provide the services. The homework is then up to you. Jeremy mentioned that you should ask for references for your foresters. Do the same thing with a vendor. Ask them for references and follow up on them. Make sure you're hiring somebody who's going to do the work to NRCS standards, but also your standards. So when you're hiring a vendor to do work in your woods, these are kind of just general guidelines. Call more than one vendor before you decide on who you're going to hire. Ask them a bunch of questions. Make sure they complete the type of work that you need to get done. If they don't have a pesticide license, they're probably not going to be able to control the invasive plants in your woods. So make sure you explain to them what the work is and make sure that they complete that type of work. Ask for references and follow up. Talk to people that they have worked for and see how well they did, whether they would recommend them. Again, it's just like any other work that you hire out. When you're hiring a plumber, you generally ask for references before you pick who you're going to hire. The same thing's true in forestry. Ask what they would charge. Make sure you understand what they would charge because it may not be the same as what EQIP reimburses. And ask for an estimated timeline. So we do have vendors in Ohio. Generally speaking, we don't have enough. A lot of them are very busy. And so ask how long it will be before they're able to start, how long they think it would take to complete the project, and make sure that it works with your EQIP contract. Also ask about whether or not they have their pesticide license, pesticide insurance, and any relevant trainings, chainsaw training, depending on the type of work that you're hiring for. You want to make sure you hire someone who is able, legally able, physically able, and willing to do the job on your timeline. Once you finish up your work under that EQIP contract, you would then reach out to your local state service forester. We would come out, check the work, make sure it's completed to NRCS standards. And if it is, we sign off on it, we send that on to NRCS, and NRCS certifies the practices and issues payment. If we go out and it doesn't quite meet NRCS's standards, we're then going to work with you or the vendor that you hire to identify what needs completed in order to get that certification and payment. And so we'll work with you at that point. Maybe it's just some of the invasives were missed and need treated, a little bit of follow-up. Make sure you thin enough trees if you're doing a thinning. Just make sure that it meets their program standards. Now, some of the benefits of NRCS incentive programs is you do get reimbursed for some non-commercial woodland improvement work. Some of these activities that really help improve your woods, but that you don't get a financial benefit from. And so you're expending your own time, your own money, your own energy to get this work done. It's a way to help compensate for some of that. On our end, it helps make woods in Ohio healthier, more sustainable, and we have more landowners who are meeting their objectives, who are getting what they want out of their woods long-term. It also provides a means to hire someone to complete some of this work that you may not be comfortable doing, or you may not be able to go out and do. And so it helps get more work done in the woods where it would be very difficult to get that work done otherwise. Now, if you're interested in this program, you can reach out either directly to NRCS, each county has an office, or your local state service forester. So we do provide the technical assistance. We will come out multiple times, work with you over the course of your contract. We will help set up what practices your woods would benefit from, what your management plan has, maybe what it doesn't have, help to get an addendum to your plan. We then fill out all the documents and send them to NRCS. We come out once you are done, sign off on that practice. But if you are also doing the work yourself, we may be able to come out and mark some of it for you. And so if you're uncomfortable identifying your bush honeysuckle, maybe we can flag a small area so that you get a feel for what it looks like and can then finish that area on your own. Or help you pick which trees should be removed in a crop tree release. And so we can help provide some of that technical assistance where NRCS provides the financial assistance. We can then also direct you to the right people to get your application turned in and figure out what your next steps are. For this year, the EQIP sign up ended in January. We're currently working on those now. If you're interested for the future, NRCS takes applications year round. Usually it will be one time a year where they collect them all up and then work through and figure out who is going to get funded. And so stay tuned. It'll probably be next fall or winter for 2022. But work with your state service forester and we can help provide that information for you. So with that, I guess we have some time for questions. I do have my email up there. Feel free to send me any questions you may have later. I'll leave that up for a minute.
Stephanie, can you see the Q&A or do you want me to read them to you?
I might be able to get it.
There's just essentially
Okay.
in there.
Yeah. Okay, so if you know you have the correct growing conditions for ginseng, how best do you include planting in EQIP? That is something that you will have to work directly with your state service forester to make sure it's incorporated in your management plan and to apply for that practice when you apply for EQIP. And so your initial application is only going to ask what land use. You're just going to say that you're applying for forest. And from that point on, you work with your state service forester to figure out which practices out of your plan you want to include, over what time frame. And then we also work to create job sheets, basically directions on how to meet the practice. And so we'll provide you some information on what you need to do, what your timeline is, and when you're going to do it. We also have a question, what is AGI for EQIP eligibility? That's your adjusted gross income. They're looking at basically how much money you make. So they don't want to provide financial assistance to people who don't need it, absolutely need it. It's something that's done through Farm Service Agency. It's filled out once when you apply, and then they use that in determining your overall eligibility. It's a paperwork, basically. Then let's see, a question from Ron. Is there a site where I can see what rate EQIP reimburses certain forest management activities? Yes, they post that on their website. And I will tell you the easiest way to find it is to Google Ohio NRCS payment schedule. And I can include that in the chat. Their website is very difficult to navigate. I often have trouble with it. So I usually Google what I want and get there quicker. Let me see if I can find my chat. And I'll try to put that link in. It didn't copyright from my PowerPoint. So I'll try that here in a little bit once I'm done.
Yeah, and that's what I thought. Rick is asking for the actual amount for the AGI. Do you know that?
I don't know. I don't know. That's something that's handled directly by NRCS and Farm Service Agency. And I don't normally get involved in that part of it. So let's see, we're gonna search for Ohio NRCS payment schedule, and it should bring up a table that includes all of the rates for the different EQIP practices. Now, once you get into that table, there are different, what they call scenarios under each practice. And it's basically just smaller scale details. Like we're gonna do tree planting, but we're gonna do hand planting of bare root seedlings with tree shelters. And that'll have its own cost associated with it. Or we're going to do, 2-gallon pots, and that has a different cost. And so there's a lot of different options when you start looking at that table, but that includes all of the different practices for the state. You'll have to look for the specific forestry practices. It includes all the pasture, all the ag land, everything, but that's where you would find those.
Hey, thank you, Stephanie. That was amazing.
Good. It's a great program.
I learned a lot. I think the forest farming is very exciting, and I know a lot of people that are interested in that. And this was probably news to a lot of people that there's an EQIP practice for that. So,
yep. I do see a comment in the chat that the multi-story cropping is hopefully restricted to native plants. Your service foresters are working with you on that. We're going to make sure you're planting native plants. So we don't want to see the next invasive issue because then we'll have to deal with it. So yes, we are looking at native plants to plant to provide that either food or forage or fiber or medicinal, whatever you're looking to grow in your woods.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Certainly appreciate your presentation today. A lot of good stuff there. We'll be breaking here for lunch and passing the baton to our Ohio Tree Farm Committee Chair, Cassie Ridenhour, for some remarks and begin the recognition pieces at 12:50. You will note a little later on the screen a bit of a shift in the order of those presentations, but we will start at 12:50. So Cassie, it's all yours.
Great. Stay tuned at 12:50. We've got an exciting presentation about this year's Tree Farm of the Year. A lot of good management practices. All right. See you guys in a bit.